Have you ever wondered why some designs look balanced, clean and professional? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how you can use frames, layouts, and grids in Figma to make your designs clean, consistent, balanced, and professional looking, even if you're just starting out. In our last video, I showed you how you can set up Figma and how you can get started with creating your first designs. So, let's get started. In our last video, I showed you how you can use Figma, get started, and even create your very first design screens. If you've not watched that, you can go ahead and check out the videos that are uploaded in this series. The very first few videos explain more about how you can use Figma to set up your designs and get started, even if you're a complete beginner. Now, let's talk about frames. So, frames are like containers. They hold your design elements. You can have a frame for an app screen, for a button, or for your navigation bar. And you can have a frame inside of another frame. You can create a frame by pressing the keyboard shortcut F on your keyboard and selecting as a device. Or you can simply come down here to your action bar and select this icon for the frame. Once you click on it, you get a couple of options over here on the right side of your screen. So under the phone, you get many different phone sizes and screen dimensions that you can use as your frames. So let's select an iPhone 16. Once I select that, you can see over here on this white space that I have a frame, an empty frame on my design environments, and this is an iPhone 16 frame because it has the dimensions for the screen of an iPhone 16. So every frame that you create becomes an artboard, which is a defined screen in your design, and inside this particular frame you can place shapes, text, and images, and that will all be neatly contained inside the frame. You will also notice over here on the left side of my screen on the layers panel, it says here iPhone 16, which means it is currently showing what I have here on this design environment on my canvas, which is the only thing that happens to be on this canvas is the frame that we have created newly. So here on the layers panel is how Figma keeps your design organized. So anything that you add, whether inside this frame or outside the frame in your canvas, will be nested under here in the layers panel. Now let's talk about constraints. Constraints is where your layout starts becoming responsive. Constraints tell Figma how elements should behave when they are placed inside the frame and then the frame is resized. So when you place an element or anything inside this frame and you resize the frame, constraints help Figma to understand how to behave when you resize this frame. For example, okay guys, so still on constraints, let's assume this rectangle here is a navigation bar that we want to include in our frame. So for this, we would assume our navigation bar is meant to sit at the bottom part of this frame that we have here. So I just use the align tool to position this horizontally at the center and also at the bottom of the frame, so I make sure it's properly aligned. Now with constraints, I can tell the frame here how to behave whenever I resize it and how it will interact with this element that we have here. So you can see here the constraints menu is open. So let's say I select on the first drop down, I select left, and then on the second drop down I select bottom. What this means is whenever I resize this frame or however I choose to resize this frame, this particular element is going to remain at the bottom left of this frame. So to test this, I would select the frame and then I can try to resize it in many different dimensions, just like this. Now you can see that no matter how I choose to resize this frame, this particular element that we have here sits at the bottom left corner of this frame. It doesn't go anywhere. And if I choose to make this frame longer, no matter how long the frame gets, the element is going to stick to the bottom of my frame. It's not going to go anywhere. Now, without constraints, it's actually hard to do this. You might have to move all these elements manually. But what if I want to also do this and I want to ignore my constraints, but I don't want to take them out of my design entirely? So to do that, I could choose to resize this frame, but this particular element, even though it has constraints, can still stay in the same position that I have put it. What I would do is when resizing this element, I would hold Control or Command down. You can see when I resize this frame here, just like this particular element does not move. It still maintains its position. That is because by holding Command and Control while I resize this, it tells the frame to ignore the constraints that that particular element has. Alright, so I know you must be wondering how we added the red layout grids that you could see in the previous screens. Layout grids are usually the secret behind balanced and aligned designs. They help you to align your elements consistently across all your designs. You can add one by simply heading on to the properties panel and then scrolling down. You can see an option here that says layout grid and a plus button on the right side of it. So while your frame is selected, you can come here to this option that says layout grid and then click on the plus on the right side of it. After you've done that, you will notice the grids that appear on your frame or in your frame. Now, what you can do is adjust this grid to fit your designs. For mobile screens, a 4-column grid works great, and for desktop screens, you can try using a 12-column grid. It helps with complex layout. So how you can get that is simply clicking here to open the drop down and select columns instead. After you've done that, you notice that there are more options here for you to work on. So for the count, you simply input the number 4, and then you can go ahead and input different numbers on the margin and the gutter based on how your design requires it. You could use something as simple as 20 pixels for the margin and then 20 pixels for the gutter. So what this the layout grid starts, and then the gutter is the space that is between where this layout grid begins becomes bigger or wider if I increase the number. So let's say I make the number here under margin higher. So let's say I put in a figure as big as 50 pixels. You will notice that the change happens here from the edge of my frame to where this layout grid starts, and that is the margin. So when I click enter, you can see the space here increases. Now the gutter is the space between each of these grids. So if I should put in a number here, a higher digit such as 50, you will notice that the space between these grids will also increase. So I click enter and you can see the space between these grids increase. So the margin is the space from the edge of your frame to where your layout grid starts, while the gutter is the space that is between each of these grids themselves. And that is some of the most basic or most useful information that you can learn that has to do with layout grids and how you can also create your own in your designs. Now let's bring it all together. Let's use frames, grids, and layouts, and also even constraints to create a beautiful layout for your design or for an app screen right here in Figma. So I'm going to fast forward this section where I design a login screen using the layout grid that we have just created. If you also want to do that, you can slow down this video to watch how I do it, or simply create yours and get creative with it. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this video. Now, in our next videos, I'm going to walk you through typography and how you can select fonts, how you can create visual hierarchy, and how you compare different fonts to create beautiful looking designs. Don't forget to like, comment, tell me your favorite fonts. We might even use it in the next video. And also share this video so it can be helpful to others. and I'll see you in the next video.